Hi, Assalamu alaikum. I hope you all are doing good and having wonderful weekend. Today we have Hafsah Sarfaras with us. She is a communication professional and she's a journalist also. So I would ask Hafsah to introduce herself, tell us a little bit about your education background and all.
Hi, Raj. Hope you're having a good day. So I'm Hafsa. I'm a development communication specialist. My day job is that I work as the head of communications for UNDP's Rule of Law program. And I'm also a freelance journalist right now, not working actively, but in the past, I've reported for the Express Tribune and freelanced for most major publications of Pakistan, including the News and Dawn. I've also worked as a communications professional for two of USAID's projects in Pakistan. One of them was the Michelle Obama's Let Girls Learn initiative, and the other was the public outreach communication activity project between 2016 and 2018, which was the largest comms project of the agency, and we took care of communications for all their other projects. So very holistic. I've also done a communications fellowship in the US where I worked for a year. I was one of the four people in my batch, and two from Pakistan selected to work as a communications manager at Cultural Vistas. It's an organization that promotes international exchange. So I went in 2019, came back last year, and then I joined the UN as a communications and reporting specialist. So this is a brief summary of what I've done work-wise. Let me know when you want to talk about my educational experiences.
No, I think you should tell us about your education background and all. Yes.
Okay. So
Go.
I studied business administration. At the time, I was as clueless as most 16, 17, 18-year-olds about what to do with life, how to figure things out. Um, and so, yeah, I knew that I didn't want to study sciences, although my parents were very insistent. And so I pursued business administration. And I think 4 years of studying business made me realize that if there's one area that I want to focus on, that's marketing, because I always had a creative instinct to me. So I opted for a master's in marketing, a specialized marketing course when I was opting for postgraduate courses. I went to London. I pursued my postgraduate program at Queen Mary University of London. I did an MSc in marketing. This was between 2013 and early 15 or end of 2014. Yeah, so I did that. I came back. My first job, as I briefly mentioned before, was of an art and culture reporter at Express Tribune. And it's interesting how I studied, like a lot of people may be thinking that she studied business and marketing, but she came back and she worked as a reporter and a journalist. So how did that happen? And there's an interesting story to it. When I was I think 12 or 13 years old, my first publication got like published in a children's magazine, and this was a small poem I had written in a class about fear of examinations. And I just and this was part of the course, so like all students had to do it, but I went the extra mile and I typed that poem up and then I sent it to um, the children's magazine that comes with the news on Saturdays. Back in the day, it was called, I think, Disney Time or Disney Discoverer. I don't even remember because this was like years ago, and it got published. So the first time I saw my name as a byline in the paper, I just felt like this is something I want to do. And it's sad that this was when I was opting for colleges. This was 2008. We still don't have a lot of liberal arts colleges in Pakistan. And for my undergrad, I did not have the option to go abroad. So my options were limited. I had to choose a course like within my city actually. So, and mass communications was in my idea not really J school. Like J school is journalism school. So mass communication was not my idea of a journalism or media education. But what I did was, and this is what I tell a lot of students also, that if you're if you have to study something that's not exactly your passion, you can still make it to your field of your passion. All you have to do is stay in touch with it. So how I did that was throughout the first 2 years of my college, like year one and year two, right out of A levels, I worked as assistant editor of a nationwide young girls magazine. It doesn't publish anymore, but back in the day it used to, and it was called Pink. So, as the assistant editor, my role was to decide the theme of the magazine, select and commission articles, edit them, get in touch with contributors, do interviews of VIPs, celebrities, make sure to produce content that readers would be interested in. I did that for 2 years. And then I also freelanced for Dawn and the News all the while I was studying um, in college. So by the time I got done with my master's, I had around 500 or 600 published pieces in the papers. And that gave me an edge when I was looking for work. And although I was a fresh marketing student, like out of college, a professional with very little experience, I had a lot of writing experience because all these publications that I had gave me an edge. So naturally, the first role that I got was of a reporter. And I worked there for a year and a half. And then, interestingly, and I would like to mention this story because, a lot of young people are like, oh, LinkedIn is no good. How do we look for jobs? You can't get one until you have a reference. While I was working as a reporter at Express Tribune, this one day I got a message on LinkedIn from the PR director of Morris and Charles Saatchi, which is a UK-based independent communications firm. And he told me that he was based in Karachi. He told me that they were looking for someone with storytelling experience for their USAID project to tell stories of development intervention initiatives. And he felt like I fit the role. So he told me if I'd be interested. Just give me a second. Let me turn this on.
Take it.
Why is this? Okay, so he told me that they're looking for someone with my experience, but also someone who's open to exploring and learning more. And although I had done journalism like freelance and on the field for like freelance, I'd done for I think 7 years throughout. Like I started it in before O levels, and this was like masters, and then on the job for a year and a half. I felt like I wanted to do something different. And then I also knew that once you've written for the paper, once you know what kind of, how to go about it, you can still do the stories that you want to do, even if you're not in the field or not in the newsroom. Because most publications and papers and editors are open to taking pitches from freelancers and writers who are not necessarily journalists. So I knew as a journalist, I could do quality work, but less in quantity, because when you're working as a reporter, you have to file something every day. And like sometimes even 2 to 3 stories a day, and all of those are not like the quality over quantity and quantity over quality. So all of those are not like groundbreaking stories, and all of those are not even very detailed stories. Some of them are just event coverages. So I felt like I could contribute more if I get out of the field and venture into communications and learn something new. So that's how I ventured into development communications. And I've worked with multiple donors, including USAID. Now I work at the UN, and our project is also multiple donor funded. So we're funded by, it's the Rule of Law program, which is funded by the government of Japan. We're funded by USAID as well. We're funded by the EU. In the past, we were funded by the Swiss Corporation. So yeah, this might be a little tough jargon for some people hearing, but yeah, this is my background.
No, like
No,
it
like
is
it
really,
is
really
really
interesting that
interesting that
how you took turns. For example, like from O levels to like your like that intermediate stage, and then your bachelor's, then your master's, and what you chose as a profession, but having something in background that you're good at, doing it from the very start. But how important do you think that it is where you like doing the right degree. Like you did your degree in like business, you like specialized in marketing, but you always knew there was something, like you said that one of your teachers maybe said that you can do whenever you want to do. Like it is not that there's only one time limit for it. You can do it. But how important for this generation do you think it is to choose the right degree, choose the right subjects for the thing they should really do? Because in what, for example, an individual who is interested in journalism or communication, so how important do you think it is?
Okay, so there are some fields in which you have to study the specialized study. Like you cannot be a doctor after doing BBA. You cannot become a
Yes,
lawyer after doing a marketing degree. You cannot be an engineer after studying medicine. So these are technical skills, very specialized programs. And I think if, like, for instance, even accounting, you can't go into accounting and finance after studying HR. But there are also some fields where there are some basic traits. So like for journalism, I feel like there are some very basic traits that you need to have. And then although I'm sure there, like, people who go to J school or people who do mass communication, study media, have an edge, but that's not to say that somebody who hasn't studied media or journalism cannot become a journalist. Because some people are instinctively better communicators, they are inquisitive, so they ask good questions. They write very well, they're good on screen, they're great behind the camera, and all of these things are very essential to be a journalist. So, and also,
true.
if you don't have these things in you, if you're not naturally great at communications, if you're not a people's person, if you don't like meeting new people, going after them, asking them questions, doing your research, even if you go to J school, even if you study media sciences, you're
That's
not going.
true.
I mean, there's only so much education can do. It's also a lot about what your personality is like. So yeah, so but education, like the right education, is very important. However, I feel like in communications, I mean, business and marketing is, there's a lot of stress on communications. Like while we were doing the
Mm,
business degree, there was a lot of business communications, there was a lot of writing involved. And
mm,
when you talk about journalism and communications, they're two different careers, but there's a lot of overlap. And I feel like as a communications professional, being a journalist in the past has given me an edge. Because, like, as and when I'll talk about my work as a communications professional, you'll see that there's so much work related to media outreach, and all of that is related to the media and getting in touch with journalists. So when you come from that field, you naturally know how they work and how and when should anyone best approach them, and so on.
okay, okay, thank you. Okay, Hafsa, we are also getting few comments. um, let's go through them. Harun
Okay.
Aftab is saying that it's a great session.
Yeah.
Amaya session saying that happy Merafuture is bringing us interviews from professionals from such fields. Believe me, we really appreciate all the professionals who are coming. Great session. Okay, here's one question from Mariam Ahmed. Could you please tell us about digital journalism too?
Okay. So I have not worked as a digital journalist, but the interesting thing is that these days all journalists are in some way or the other digital journalists also, because most
Yes.
stories go online, most stories have a web presence, and digital journalism is only a few years ago it was beginning in Pakistan. So this is an area where journalists can really contribute, and for young people who are so used to social media, websites, doing everything on the internet, this is great because all of these skills come naturally to them. So there, digital journalism is basically you report a story in the traditional way. Like for instance, you could be a multimedia journalist where you do video storytelling, or you could be like a digital journalist where you write the story which goes online. As a digital journalist, you have more responsibility on your shoulders because sometimes you're supposed to, um, like, not only just tell the story and get your facts and do your questionnaire, but you also have to make sure that you make a video, which then goes to the desk, and the desk edits it in a way. The good thing is that you don't need to be a videographer to be a digital journalist. Like when we were working and stories had just begun to go online, they told us that anytime, like for instance, if you're covering a protest and your story is going to go online, why don't you just record a short clip, video clip from your phone and send it to us? The desk would just, they have technical people on the desk who edit it according to the platform where they're going to use it. So the platform could be the publication's website, the platform could be the publication's social media channel, so all of that, and then they make sure that the video is edited in a way that it goes perfectly on the platform.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. There is another question. It is somewhat related, but Harun Aftab is saying that could you tell about freelance journalism?
Yes. So, freelance journalism essentially is when you're not working for a publication, you're a writer, and you pitch stories to the editor, and then they commission those stories and you work on them independently. So, for the larger part of my life, I think since the age of 15 or 14, I've been working as a freelance journalist. And how I operate, or how most freelance journalists operate, is um, they have the freedom to choose topics that they're interested in. Like, for instance, I mean, I could be working on, um, uh, so, like, for instance, I could be working on women in media. So, if that is my topic, I'll make a mind map, and then if you're pitching a story to a journalist, you need, like, there are a couple of steps, right? So you, and this is great because students can do this while they're in college. So, and students can do this while they're doing, pursuing their O levels, A levels, metric, FSC, whatever, in school, college, whenever, or when they're transitioning between college and work. What you essentially do is you think of a topic, you do your research on it, you do your primary research, you find out why this is going to be an interesting read for people. Why would they want to read it? So the first thing is you understand why you want to write on that topic and what is your content going to be like. Who are your sources going to be like? For instance, if I'm doing a story on women in media, what about women in media? The fact that Pakistan still, like, women are still represented in media, or the fact that they've started to grow, or the fact whether media is able to provide a conducive environment to women media professionals. So, like, understand and study what is it that I'm trying to tell and what is the story that I'm trying to tell, and then figure out why would people be interested, who would they be interested in reading about. Like, for instance, if this is the topic I've chosen, then pick 3 4 senior professionals in media, and then you have to be holistic. You have to talk about television, you have to talk about paper, you have to talk about editors who are not reporting stories but behind the desk. Go to them, form questions, ask them, ask relevant questions that will support your story and not make you deviate from the topic. And when, and actually, like, you go to interviewing part later, but when you've made your mind map, your next priority is going to be sell this mind map to a publication. So how do you do, like, the one of the major parts about freelance journalism is selling your ideas to editors who would be interested in publishing them. um, and this is where your skills are going to come in, because now you have to be a salesperson. So this is where your, like, in my case, my business
Yeah,
education was play. If I go and sell a social issue story to an economic page, they would not be interested in. They don't care. They only care about what IMF is giving to Pakistan, and what, how is that impacting the
hmm,
economy and so on.
true.
I have to find a publication that publishes stories on relevant themes, and a publication
Hmm,
that has that kind of audience. So, for instance, if I'm reporting on women issues, then the news has a section which is called which is called You. It comes every Tuesday, and they publish stories women related. Then Dawn has a web presence, like digital journalism someone spoke about. It's called Images. They do women, they do children, they do social issues, they do culture. So all of that goes there. Then if you're doing fashion, then Sunday magazines are a great place to pitch stories. Um, So yeah, so you find the right kind of publication, and then there are multiple ways to reach out to editors who work behind those publications. One great way is to find out their contact from the publication itself. And I think before you choose a publication, you should make sure to read that publication at least 4 to 5 weeks in a row before you pitch it, because that will give you an edge. You'll figure out what kind of stories they publish, but you'll also figure out what kind of tone they prefer. So, and then you reach out to the editor and you make sure you give them value. You pitch your idea, and if they're interested, they're going to accept your pitch, and then they'll give you a certain deadline to work on that story. You work on
Okay.
it, you submit it, and then of course they take it from there.
Okay.
And also one thing I want to add, your first
Okay.
pitch is
Perfect.
the
Thank
most
you.
difficult.
Sure.
Your first pitch is always the most difficult. Once you've been
Hmm.
published 1 or 2 times, then the editors have their trust on you in you.
Okay. There's another question from Amara Sajid, that what is the scope of a communication specialist in Pakistan and how can people improve their chances of getting a job in this field?
Okay, great question. This is what I wanted to come on to now. And I'm glad Amara has given us a foray into that. Communications is a very important field in Pakistan. The scope is only growing. Like back in the day, people used to think that marketing is a core area and HR is a core area, and accounting is a core area. Interesting how communications is a core area in most organizations. At the bare minimum, every organization, even if it's small, is going to have at least one comms person. If it's a larger organization, they're going to have a department. Um, and as time is growing, and I'm assuming the audience of this session is still, has 1 or 2, 3 years to go into the job market, the field of communication is constantly growing. So it's going to be even larger. And this is not just in Pakistan. Like when I was applying for the fellowship in the US, I was told that for most people, it takes 2 years to get selected. It took me 6 months because I had applied in communications. And in the US, also, there's a very high demand of forms. Um, and when it comes to communication, the scope of communications, it's important to understand that there are two main areas. So there's development communications and there's corporate communications. Um, and I will explain a little bit about what the two are. Development communications is communications for the non-profit sector. So it would be NGOs, it would be the UN, it would be USAID, it would be DFID, and like other donors, the EU, and so on. And corporate communications is communications for the corporate sector, which would be communications for Jazz, for Pepsi, for Nestle, for British American Tobacco, and so on. Um, Generally, corporate communications is more cutthroat and more thriving because they have a lot more content to put out there. Um, and like sometimes corporate communications is also very closely working with marketing and branding to see what are the priorities of comms. But I can speak more about development communications because that's what that's my area of expertise. Can you repeat, like, there was a second part of the question besides the scope? Like, I think it was, what can students do to get a job?
To improve the chances of getting a job in this field.
So, so I feel like, like with jobs, I always say it's a lot of it is luck. But there's some things that you can do in your school or college years that give you an edge as compared to other people applying with you. For instance, if you work in a communications department while you're studying as an intern, that will give you an edge instantly. Similarly, if you're throughout your college years, you were the group leader for most projects, you were doing the presentations, you were in front of the camera, you're a people's person, you have a wider network, you're more confident, you're a great you're great at conversation, then all of these things obviously give you an edge. So to sum up, I would say, if you're whatever you're studying and you want to get into comms, make sure that you make the most of all speaking opportunities. You work on your communication skills. You work on becoming a better listener, you work on becoming a better speaker, and then um you're great at social media, because like media is an important element of communications, whether it's corporate or social. um, in terms of technical skills, I feel like students who are great at creating content, and this could be blogs, this could be photography, this could be content for social media, this could be graphics, animations. That gives you an edge as well, especially in your primary years. Like when you join as the entry level roles in communications, they look for technical skills. When you as you go up in your career, they don't care so much whether you know graphic designing or not, because they're going to have a graphic designer who's going to be reporting to you and will support you. But when you enter the field, they want someone who can do everything, at least like know the basics of everything. So yeah, these are some of the skills that I think would be very helpful in um, making you a great fit for a entry level comms role.
Okay, perfect. That answers her question. Another question we received that from Mariam Ahmed, that what are the channels for freelancing in digital journalism in Pakistan?
Okay, so both Dawn and Express Tribune have digital channels. They like all these papers go digital, so all of them. Daily Times has web presence. The News has web presence, but Dawn and the News do stories that don't go in print but only go online. So that's essentially digital the journalism. And then for lifestyle, there are other places like Mango Bars. There's Parlo, there's Katakart, there's so many others. So essentially, it all depends on what genre you want to contribute in, and then like if you're still confused as to like if you know your genre and you don't know where to reach out, then you do like a basic research on online. But mostly, like these channels like Mashin now does digital journalism. Mashin is the website that Mahira Khan's team is working on, and they do like a lot of interesting topics. They do a lot of topics that the print would actually not do, like taboo topics about women and children and harassment and abuse and all these. And it's interesting how they've given like this huge platform to young people to contribute. um, and these new platforms are actually easier to contribute to as opposed to serious publications like Dawn and the News and Express Tribune. Arij, can you hear me? I'm done answering the question. Okay, so how do I manage the stress of tight deadlines? Um, I, I mean, I don't know how to answer this question. I've always been good at it. I don't get too stressed by deadlines. I'm somebody who is motivated by work. I'm somebody who's motivated by having a lot on their plate. So I just, so I'm sorry I lost you, Reach, but I took on Maham Bilal's question about how do I manage the stress of tight deadlines. But I do think that the stress, like it's easier to manage the stress when you've organized your responsibilities. So ahead of my week, I make a list of things that I'm supposed to do for the week. And then I make a list of things that I'm supposed to do on Monday. And my Monday begins with like checking one thing after the other. And I just like get a lot of motivation to do more as I check things off. So if you're organized and if you have your list ready, then you're going to be accomplishing things before the deadline. So you'll be in a good space.
Uh, we have another question. It's from Haroon Aftab that as you have worked in US also, is working environment different here as compared to US? Like
So
it is, there's another question which I would link it to this one also, that sometimes you choose profession that is either attractive in your local market or either attractive in an international market, but sometimes due to few reasons you have to shift. So can you address this question, like that how is then like what did you feel that how different it is?
So the good thing is that communications is needed in any part of the world. So like for instance, if you don't plan to move from Pakistan but you end up having to, and you've had a good, 2-3 years of work experience over here, you are more likely to find a job, because any organization anywhere in the world will need at least one communications professional, if not more. When I went to the US, and one of the reasons why I went to the US on that fellowship is because I was always curious, how do they do communications? Like, how is their communications any different? And, a year of working there, I realized it's pretty much exactly the same. Like, they do the same internal and external comms that we do. And I realized, um, like the at the place where I was working before going to the US, we were doing a lot more media outreach than my organization in the US. So the difference is essentially maybe work ethics. People are more serious, people are more respectful of each other's boundaries, people are more respectful. But in terms of work, it was the same. The environment was slightly maybe slightly different. um, but the work was the same. Essentially, we were, in fact, I am doing a lot more work at my role in the UN in Pakistan, as opposed to the role that I had at Cultural Vistas in the US.
We have one comment. It is for Harun Aftab. Actually asked question before, so he's saying that thanks for the brief answer. We have one more question that is quite detailed one. Would consider freelance journalism as stable income? How is the freelancing job market at the moment? Is there any sort of competition? How many hours would you need to invest per day considering the limited time students have on hand?
Okay.
Hafsa, I would keep this question in front of you so that because there are multiple parts to it, so that you can see and answer them accordingly.
So you can close this because I've opened the comments on the side. I have the question in front of me, so you can close it from the screen. Um, it is
Okay.
not. It
Okay,
is not.
perfect.
So you don't do freelance journalism to make an income, so to say. I did it because I always liked extracurriculars. Writing is something I enjoyed doing. It was a passion. Sure, like in my college years, I got a laptop from the income that I earned through freelance journalism. It was a good pocket money, but it's not necessarily an income, because you get paid anywhere between 2 to 7,000 for a story, and you don't do more than a story a week if you're doing a lot of work. Sometimes it takes two months to get published, to get one story published. So it also depends on the amount of work you're doing, how good you are at it, how interested the editors are in, you know um, pitching you stories. But also, one thing that I want to be very honest with is, most publications don't pay freelancers on time, and this is sad and it's bad, and that's not how it should be. But I feel like freelance journalism is not, um, like, for to earn an income. It helps you become a better writer, it helps you get a job, but it's not a job. So um and in terms of, she said, how is the freelancing job market at the moment? The freelancing is, freelance journalism is not necessarily a job market, but it will always be thriving. There will always be a need for new voices, new writers, new names, and you will always have a chance to get published. The other thing is that how many hours would you need to invest per day considering the limited time? So it all depends on what you want to work on. Like, for instance, if you want to do one story a month and get 7,000 rupees for it, sure, do that. It's probably going to take you 2-3 days to work on it, and in a month everyone has 2-3 days. Even during exam season, like, we would have 2-3 days. But it also depends on how many stories you're doing. Like, if you start working for a culture paper as a freelance journalist, someone who has to do 3 stories a day, 3 stories a week, then that's obviously, the volume goes up, the time goes up, your commitment with the publication goes up, but then you make more money also. So if like on the average you're getting 3,000 per story, that's 9,000 a week. You're not going to get it at the end of the month. Freelancers usually at the earliest get their paychecks 2 months after they get published. And for some papers, like I wouldn't name the paper, but I haven't been paid since 2015 for like 70 stories that I've around 70 stories that I've done for a paper. So I don't do it to earn money. I do it because I like writing, because it supports my career as a communications professional, but not necessarily to make money.
Okay, so let me extend this question to another point. That, for example, if someone is interested in journalism, they want to pursue it with all their passion and with all their energy, but to also make it as a source of income, not like because obviously whenever you're doing something freelance or digital, you know that you're doing something as a full time somewhere. If you are the earning one, so, do you think that if you're good at, if you put all your efforts, it can become one of the jobs that could fund you completely?
That also depends on what funding completely means. Like when I left my role as a reporter, um, I'm very vocal about some things, like the corporate sector or the work industry will so many times make women feel like they don't need money, and they're just doing it for time pass. um,
But
i feel I feel like if we're investing the same hours that men are, then we're entitled to the same pay that men are. But this was in journalism, it was not even like a gender wage gap difference. It was just that I saw people older than me, like 5 6 years into the same work, making maybe only 10 15,000 rupees more than I was making. And then I felt like, I'm very vocal about it. If I'm working hard, I need money. So I transitioned into a role that pays more. Journalism is underpaid all over the world, not just in Pakistan. And I don't want to have any, like, I don't want to misguide anyone. If you want to make big money, um, you could be an anchor person, which is also a journalist, but a print journalist or a digital journalist would not essentially make a lot of money. But then it also depends on what a lot of money means. So if we're talking about like the monetary, fresh journalists, reporters get anywhere between 25 and 50, when they start working. Um, Seniors would get more. Anchor persons get between, I've heard, between 5 lakh and 50 lakhs so a month. So, I mean, it all depends on where you go in your career, right?
okay. So now I think that we should shift from a job market or from industry to we should shift a little bit more towards the individuals who are in their intermediate, in their matriculation, in who want to pursue this career, but they don't know how, or they don't know which degrees to choose. They don't know where to go to someone. Speaking from Merafuture platform, this is one of the process that we are doing, that we want to provide a platform where individual can come, assess themselves, and get to know that where they should go. But being a professional, what is your guidance towards that?
Okay. So we're essentially we're talking about journalism and communications today, right? And these two are two different careers. So when it comes to journalism, I think media studies, mass communication, BNU also offers a program in journalism. I think NUS does the same now. Their media program has courses on journalism and reporting. So these are some great programs that young people could look into. I also feel like studying social science or studying political science is also a great way to get into journalism, because then your options remain open. You could work for the social sector, you could work as a journalist. Um, so that, and then for social sciences, there's LUMS also, NUS does programs. I'm sure a lot more universities offer those programs. Um, and then for communications, I've seen people who studied engineering and come into communications. So, uh, you know, I mean, I'm not going to say that if you don't study this, then you can't be a communications professional. But if you're not studying like business has a lot of programs in communication, so you're generally like you're learning business communications, you're learning, you know, social media, you're learning other things. But if you're not pursuing a program that has a lot of communications courses in it, then you need to work on those skills, like we've spoken about this earlier. Then you need to work on those skills on your own. You need to put in that extra effort, you need to go that extra mile. um so yeah, but but you yeah, a lot of universities now, I mean, if they don't
They
offer
do offer.
communication. Yeah, and then also the thing is, while you're opting for your undergrad, and if you want to have a career in communications and you don't find a good university in Pakistan that has communications, like a bachelor's in communications, you could opt for something like social science or business administration. And then if you're opting to go abroad for your master's, then you could opt for a specific, like a communication specialized master's, because abroad the options are limitless. So, and they do have a lot of courses in
Yes,
comms.
I do. Yes, I do. We have another question from Rabil Athar. It's what's a great way to get experience for your first job? Can you recommend anything in particular?
So internships are a great way to get into your first job. More and more companies in Pakistan have now started hiring people who have interned for them. This is a great opportunity, but this also means that you cannot go to an internship and think of it like a party. Like back in the day, when we were interning, internships were a lot more, like just like time pass.
Yeah,
Now, managers and supervisors are very well aware that their time is essentially also being used when they hire an intern, because supervising a person is time consuming. So it's very important that you treat your internship like a great opportunity, as a make or break role. You could either get into that firm
true.
as a and have a job, or you could be banned from there for good. So like, yeah, so internship is a great way, and then also depends on field. Like if you're like in journalism, writing for the paper, in communications, writing for the paper, in communications you could also volunteer to handle social media of a like a maybe a cafe or a small business. You could do volunteer for that.
Yeah,
And then working on some skills like good writing, good graphic design, good social media outreach. These are some skills that you can build on to get experience for your first job.
true. There is one more question. It is from Fasir Hassan. That hi ma'am, would you see that future of mass communication is good in Pakistan in future?
Yeah, it definitely gets difficult. So yeah, so I'll answer his first question first. Um,
Sure,
I personally believe the scope of everything is good if you're good in it. So if you're good in something, you will get an opportunity. If you're average in any field, it's going to be tough for you, because like initially they used to tell us कि मेडिसिन करो या इंजीनियरिंग करो cause नौकरी मिल जाएगी, बट अगर आप उसमें भी अच्छे नहीं हैं तो नौकरी उसमें भी नहीं मिलेगी. सो आप जो भी कर रहे हैं सिंसेरिटी से करें, गो दी एक्स्ट्रा माइल, पुट इन एफर्ट, आपको काम मिल जाएगा. लेकिन स्कोप वाइज आई फील लाइक मास कम्युनिकेशन का स्कोप है, बट देन एट द सेम टाइम मैं बहुत ज़्यादा रिकमेंड नहीं करती मास कम्युनिकेशन to
true.
anyone who wants to study, pursue journalism or communications, because mass comm में फिर आप यही दो चीज़ें कर सकते हैं. बट अगर आप social sciences पढ़ते हैं तो आप ये दोनों चीज़ें भी कर सकते हैं, बट आप बहुत कुछ और भी कर सकते हैं. And I also feel like life is too long at the age of 16 or 17 to decide what you want to do for good. Like I switched from I switched from journalism to comms, development comms, but now I might want to venture into program management in a few years or do policy in a few years. So, how will I do that? I will work very closely with a program manager or a policy maker in the development sector as a communication specialist. And then, when I'm 100% sure that this is something I want to do, maybe do another master's in those fields and come back and work in that. You just have to be any field, you just have to be very good. Scope हर चीज का होगा, लेकिन स्कोप होगा जो लोग बहुत मेहनती हैं, जो लोग लाइक पीपल हु गो द एक्स्ट्रा माइल। आई फील लाइक मुझे वो जॉब ना मिलती पहली मेरी जर्नलिज्म की अगर मेरे पास 500 पब्लिश स्टोरीज ना होती। लेकिन मेरे साथ कुछ लोग थे जिनका कोई प्रायर एक्सपीरियंस नहीं था, उनको भी मिल गई। दे वर जस्ट ग्रेट एट राइटिंग, दे वर ग्रेट एट टॉकिंग एंड ऑल ऑफ दिस obviously plays a role. So the second question is, sometimes it becomes difficult for newcomers to get an internship. Um, yeah.
Yes,
Um, See, the competition is increasing by the year. Um, and मुझे याद है जब हमने बैचलर्स किया था तो आई थिंक हमारे बैच में 120 स्टूडेंट्स थे। एंड आई थिंक अब तो लाइक कई यूनिवर्सिटीज़ हैं जिनके पास लाइक हज़ार हज़ार स्टूडेंट्स हैं एक ही सब्जेक्ट के एक बैच में। तो
true.
बहुत बड़ा ये पॉपुलेशन इंक्रीज़ हो रही है, पाकिस्तान में स्टूडेंट्स इंक्रीज़ हो रहे हैं और बहुत लोग सोचे समझे बगैर कोर्सेज पिक कर रहे हैं और बस पढ़ रहे हैं और विदाउट नोइंग व्हाट दे वांट टू डू। अब मुश्किल होगा कोई भी जॉब ढूँढना, यू नो इतने साल के वर्क एक्सपीरियंस के बाद भी अच्छी जॉब ढूँढना, नई जॉब ढूँढना मुश्किल होता है। when लेकिन you just have to have those skills like देखिए अगर आप मास कम्युनिकेशन कर रहे हैं और आप कम्युनिकेशंस में काम करना चाहते हैं और आपकी यूनिवर्सिटी में ग्राफिक डिजाइनिंग का कोई कोर्स नहीं हो रहा तो आप ले लें, अपने फ्री टाइम में कोर्स लें, आप कोर्स परस्यू करें, आप अपनी स्किल सीख लें। तो मैं हमेशा कहती हूँ कि अगर किसी को कोई स्किल आती होगी ना तो उसको जॉब नहीं भी मिलेगी तो उसको काम मिल जाएगा। देयर इज अ डिफरेंस बिटवीन जॉब एंड काम। So they can make a profile on Upwork and they can earn in dollars. And this is a great, as opposed to freelance journalism, that's a better income to support while you're studying. इसी तरह अगर किसी को ग्राफिक डिजाइनिंग आती होगी, इट्स सच अ गुड स्किल कि आप अगर आपकी ज़िंदगी में कुछ साल ऐसे हैं जब आप जॉब नहीं कर सकते, लाइक if a girl recently got married, although that is no reason to not work, but for any reason if they're not able to work they can still do freelance work from home and make money to have financial independence. तो डिफिकल्ट होगा लेकिन आप स्किल सीखें, गो द एक्स्ट्रा माइल, आपको काम मिल जाएगा। रिक्रूटर्स आर ऑलवेज लुकिंग फॉर पीपल हु वर्क हार्ड। मैं आपको बता रही हूँ एज अ मैनेजर इट इज़ सो डिफिकल्ट टू फाइंड गुड टैलेंट। लोग बहुत हैं, अच्छा टैलेंट नहीं है। तो आप अच्छा टैलेंट बने, आपको काम मिल जाएगा ज़रूर।
No, that's really true. I really do believe in this. कि अगर आप like whatever you're committed to do, if you're good at that, you can excel.
Also,
I think, yeah,
one
sure.
more thing I want to add. So, when I was in the US, like I went on that fellowship knowing कि वो एक साल में खत्म हो जाएगी, and I was coming back. And my greatest fear was how will I find work when I'm back in Pakistan because job market, like job market tight, things bad. So मैं अप्रैल में गई थी और मैंने अप्रैल 2019 में गई थी और अप्रैल 2020 में I was supposed to come back. And I started looking for work in September 2019. So, like 4 or 5 months into the fellowship, 7 months before I was coming back to Pakistan, I started keeping an eye on the job market. And मुझे जो roles पसंद आते थे, गिने चुने roles पसंद आते थे, I would apply to them. And one thing I want to highlight is, a lot of you will be looking for jobs in the future. अगर आपको कोई role पसंद आता है, there's no harm in reaching out to the supervisor of that role on LinkedIn. Write to them, tell them you're interested on that role in that role and how you can contribute to it. But before you write to them, make sure that you make perfect sense. You don't want to make like a fool of yourself. First impression is the last impression. So आप अपना homework करें, आप देखें कि वो किस तरह का काम है। Genuinely कभी कभी role देख के लगता है कि like this I can really contribute to. With jobs it's like when I was doing, जब मैं graduate की थी तो मैं बहुत excite होती थी देख के कि oh like this role pays 70,000 or this role pays 1 lakh rupees. Job is as much about what they give you as what you can give to them. Like
Give
what's
them.
the extra value that you
True.
can give to them. And I also feel like आप लोग जितने भी लोग ये सेशन अटेंड कर रहे हैं, अगर आप लोग किसी स्पेसिफिक फील्ड में इंटरेस्टेड हैं, अभी पढ़ रहे हैं, start looking for jobs and see the job description कि वो मांग क्या रहे हैं. Use your college years as a great time to build on those skills. If they're asking ke communications professional will have to write blogs, start writing blogs already, किसी भी platform के लिए लिख लें. और कुछ नहीं तो अपना प्लेटफॉर्म बना लें. The good thing about the web and digital is you don't need someone to work for. You can just do brilliant work for yourself. You can have working samples ready by the time you graduate.
That's true. I guess these are all the comments we got so far. We can end the session, but really, thank you so much, Hafsa. It was a great session. It was really informative. We got to learn a lot, and I hope whoever has asked the questions, they got a perfect answer for it. And whoever is viewing this, thank you so much for watching. There's a little bit more information about Merafuture. You can go to Merafuture for your aptitude testing. We provide services for aptitude testing and career counseling also. You can visit the Merafuture website and you would get all the information that you require in choosing the right career that is perfect for you. Thank you once again, Hafsa.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Arish.
much from behalf of me also and from Merafuture team also. It was great having you here. Thank you so much. Have a
Thank you.
wonderful weekend.
You too.
Take,
Bye.
take care. Love. Bye.